Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to dive into something, well, it's pretty fascinating, but it's also deeply unsettling. We're going to unpack the psychology of seduction, but probably not in the way you're thinking. We're going to look at how some of the most intense magnetic attractions we feel aren't actually aimed at the grown-up, capable adult we are now, but at the vulnerable, needy kid we used to be.
In this question right here, man, it just cuts right to the heart of what we're talking about. It's a really tough thought to sit with. It asks us to look back at those moments of incredible connection where we felt so truly seen and to ask, what if that was all an illusion? What if what felt like love was really just a masterful appeal to a much younger, wounded part of our own mind? This isn't just theory. It's a way to understand why some relationships feel so amazing at the start, but then turn so toxic and confusing down the line.
Okay, so to get our heads around this, to navigate this pretty dark territory, we need a map of the mind. And for that, we're going to turn to the work of the legendary psychologist Carl Jung. His ideas give us the language we need to understand the hidden parts of ourselves. So think of these next few concepts not as, boring academic terms, but as tools. They're the flashlight and the compass that are going to help us see what's really going on in the dark. All right, so let's start with the big one, regression. In Jung's world, this is so much more than just acting childish. It's a very specific, unconscious defense mechanism. Picture the insane pressure of adult life. Work, money, relationships, all of it. When it all gets to be too much, the mind can just pull the emergency brake. It retreats from all that complexity and runs back to an earlier, simpler time in our development. It's a flight back to a state where somebody else took care of us, where things felt safer. And you don't choose to do this, it's an automatic reflex when you're totally overwhelmed. Next up, we have this idea of a complex. The absolute best way to think about this is like a psychological sore spot, or maybe an emotional landmine. It's this tangled up knot of memories, intense feelings, and automatic reactions that are all tied to something from our childhood. So for instance, if someone has a deep abandonment complex because of their upbringing, their partner being 20 minutes late for dinner can trigger a level of panic that's completely off the charts. It's like the 35-year-old gets shoved out of the way, and the terrified 8-year-old grabs the steering wheel. It literally hijacks your adult brain. And the final piece of our map is the shadow. The shadow is Jung's name for everything about ourselves that we refuse to look at. It's the basement of our personality, where we lock away everything we've been told is bad. Our envy, our greed, our raw selfishness, our most primitive urges, and especially our unresolved childishness. We burn a lot of energy keeping that door locked. But when we're under stress, when our defenses are down, the shadow can burst out. And that's when we find ourselves acting in ways that feel, well, not like us at all. Immature, destructive, you name it. Okay, so we've got our map, we understand regression, complexes, and the shadow. Now we're ready for the descent. We can start to see how these ideas actually play out in the real world. Our source material breaks down 4 main ways that regression can be triggered and then exploited in a relationship. And this is where the theory gets very real, and maybe for some of us, a little uncomfortable. But let's look at these as patterns to recognize, not judgments. This table is basically our cheat sheet. It breaks this whole dark art down into 4 flavors: emotional, behavioral, social, and identity. And you can see the pattern, right? For each type, there's a specific wound or need that comes to the surface. That's the core dynamic. And then there's a specific role the manipulator steps into to exploit it. It's a perfect lock and key system. So let's break down each one of these. All right, first up, and this is really the foundation for all the others, is emotional regression. This is when a grown adult, under stress, reverts back to the raw, unfiltered feelings of a little kid. Logic is out the window. All that's left is this overwhelming fear of being abandoned, a desperate need for safety, a bottomless pit of needing to be told you're okay. In that moment, the resourceful adult you've built has essentially left the building, and all that's there is this wounded inner child crying out for a parent. So how is this exploited? The tactic is disturbingly simple, but it's incredibly effective. A manipulator who is good at reading people can see the signs, the slight quiver in your voice, the way you overreact to a small criticism. And then they slide into the exact role that inner child is screaming for, the perfect parent. They deliver the lines that feel like water in a desert. "Oh, you poor thing, nobody gets you like I do." Or, "Don't you worry, I will never, ever leave you." To that regressed part of your mind, this feels like pure salvation.
But the bond that forms isn't a partnership between equals. No. It's a powerful, suffocating dependency, where their approval becomes your only source of oxygen.
Okay, the second type, behavioral regression, takes it a step further. Here, the regression isn't just a feeling inside you, it starts showing up in what you do. This is where the shadow we talked about makes its grand entrance. The stress triggers all these immature, compulsive behaviors that your adult self normally keeps on a tight leash. We're talking about things like obsessively checking their social media, picking fights just to get a reaction, or giving them the silent treatment. These aren't conscious choices. They're actions driven by pure, raw anxiety.
The strategy here is to create chaos on purpose. The manipulator uses that classic hot and cold routine. One day, they're all over you, telling you you're the greatest person alive. The next day, radio silence. This creates this constant state of anxiety and confusion, which is the perfect environment for your shadow to come out and play. You get desperate to get that hot connection back, so you start doing those compulsive things. And here's the hook. When you act out, they reward you with a little bit of affection, just a taste. This pattern of intermittent reinforcement is one of the most addictive forces on the planet. It literally trains your brain to believe that acting like a needy child is the only way to get love.
The third level we're looking at is social regression. This is what happens when the sheer weight of being an adult, the career, the mortgage, all the decisions just becomes too much. A person starts to unconsciously wish they could just give up. They develop this deep down desire to be taken care of, to have a strong authority figure come in and make all the hard choices. It's trading your own freedom for the illusion of safety. And this dynamic preys on pure exhaustion. The manipulator finds someone who is just drowning in responsibility, and then they swoop in like a savior. Their message is so simple and so seductive. You're so tired. You've been carrying so much for so long. Just let me handle it. I'll take care of everything. And for the person who's at their breaking point, this feels like a miracle. They happily hand over the keys to their life, their money, their friends, their choices. But what starts as a relief turns into a prison. The relationship becomes this dangerous, almost cult-like dependency, where their own ability to think for themselves is slowly dismantled until they truly believe they can't survive without their protector. And finally, we get to the deepest and maybe the most insidious form of all, identity regression. This goes way beyond temporary feelings or actions. This is when the person literally abandons who they are now and reverts to a persona from their past. They might start acting like the rebellious teenager they were at 16, or the insecure people-pleasing version of themselves from college. Their actual current self gets put on a shelf, and an old, often much more fragile identity is brought back to life. What makes this so sinister is how it's done. The manipulator doesn't even try to connect with the complex adult standing in front of them. Nope. They become an archaeologist of your past. They ask all these probing questions. Tell me about your wild days, or you must have been so innocent back then. They romanticize and fall in love with a version of you that doesn't exist anymore. And then, all their affection, all their validation is aimed at that old identity. You feel so seen, so understood, but it's a complete lie. You're being loved for being a ghost. And this just freezes you in time, trapping you in a past you can never grow out of, because that's the only thing getting you the love you crave. But here's a really important twist in all of this. This is not a simple story with a good guy and a bad guy. From a Jungian point of view, a dynamic like this creates a psychological prison that traps both people. It's a closed loop of interlocking wounds, a mutual destruction that feels like an unbreakable, passionate bond. Nobody gets out of this clean. And you can see this brutal symmetry right here. For the person being seduced, it's devastating. They lose their independence, their sense of self. They become just a fragment of who they were, stuck in this agonizing cycle of dependency and obsession. But look at the other side of the coin. The seducer, the one who looks like they're in power, they become possessed by it. They get addicted to the control, to the manipulation. They're not free at all. They become a slave to the very system they created, constantly having to manage the bottomless needs of the child they've created, and that task eventually consumes them entirely. So, if this is the trap, how the heck do you get out? What's the path to freedom? How do you break a cycle like this and find your way to something healthier, something real? Well, the way out, according to Jung, is not by fixing the other person. The path to freedom leads inward. The antidote to all this regression is a process Jung called individuation. Now, that's a big, fancy word, but don't let it intimidate you. All it really means is the lifelong journey of becoming a whole, complete person. It means you finally turn around and consciously face all the parts of yourself you've been running from. You acknowledge your shadow, you understand your complexes, and you learn to parent your own inner child. It's about taking full responsibility for your own stuff so you stop looking for a parent in a partner. Real, mature love can only happen between two people who are both doing that hard but rewarding work.
So to bring this all home, our source gives us 4 incredibly clear warning signs, 4 massive red flags that a relationship might be built on this kind of regression. First, if someone makes you feel incredibly safe but also frantic and addicted, beware. Second, if someone seems to encourage your most childish behaviors, almost like they find them cute, beware. Third, if the thought of being without them fills you with a deep, paralyzing terror that you literally cannot function, beware. And finally, if you get that gut feeling that they're in love with a younger, idealized version of you and don't really care about the person you are today, you need to beware. That is a clear sign the connection isn't with you, but with a ghost from your past.
In the end, everything we've talked about today, the psychology, the traps, the way out, it all boils down to this one single question. It's a question you can hold up to any relationship, past or present, to see it clearly. Is this bond built on the strength of two whole, growing adults? Or is it a transaction built on the exploitation of one person's unhealed childhood wounds? The answer to that question is everything. It's the difference between a partnership that helps you grow and one that traps you in the past. It's the difference between authentic love and a very, very convincing dark art.